Elliot Carver ducked beneath the jagged overhang of the scrapyard, his worn boots kicking up puffs of red dust with every cautious step. The twin suns of Zorath 9 burned low on the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the mounds of twisted metal and discarded machinery that littered the expanse. He adjusted the strap of his shoulder pack and squinted at the heap in front of him. Amid the corroded panels and dented cargo containers lay what looked like a derelict escape pod, its hull pitted with rust, a cracked viewport revealing tangled wires and a dark, empty interior. Most anyone else would have passed it by, deeming it worthless. The murmurs of the scrapyard crowd buzzed around him, alien voices chittering and clicking with their own unique timbre. A group of Crithian miners leaned against a stack of molten ore crates, observing him with the kind of amusement reserved for the foolish. Reinka, their foreman, clicked a mandible in a slow, mocking rhythm. "You've got a sharp eye, human," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "but I think it's stuck on rust. That pod hasn't flown in decades, probably never will." Elliot ignored the jab, crouching lower as he ran a hand along the corroded surface. The metal was rough under his gloves, flaking in orange patches that reminded him of Martian dust back on Earth. He'd been scouring every corner of Zorath 9 for weeks, salvaging scraps and discarded tech, looking for anything he could reshape into a tool that would change his fortunes. "It'll leak air before you even get it off the ground," Zala's voice cut in from the other side of the scrapyard. The Crithian engineer was taller than the others, each of his forearms folded across his chitinous chest. His eyes glinted with a sharp, analytical curiosity that he tried to disguise with disapproval. "Even if you manage to patch it, it won't meet safety regulations. You'd be lucky to make it spin in place without igniting yourself." Elliot didn't respond. Words were cheap, and mockery even cheaper. He knelt by the pod, inspecting the control panel, corroded buttons frozen in place, wires dangling like tendrils of some dead creature. His fingers itched to touch, to rewire, to breathe life into what everyone else had abandoned. The possibility of what it could become thrummed beneath his skin like electricity. "You're wasting your credits, human," Reinka said again, stepping closer, the clicking of his legs echoing over the metal debris. "I've seen humans buy worse junk than this and end up with nothing but fire hazards. Don't say I didn't warn you when your little toy fries you alive." Elliot finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting Reinka's multifaceted gaze. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but sometimes the junk has more life left than the ones who laugh at it." Mara Vesh appeared beside him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Her expression was calm but firm, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Let him do it," she said. "You know him, Reinka. Elliot doesn't see junk the way you do. He sees potential." The Crithians exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and scorn passing between them. Zal tilted his head, studying Elliot as if he were a curious, unpredictable experiment. "Potential," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Humans are strange." Elliot knelt, pulling a small handheld device from his pack. He tapped a few commands, and a soft hum vibrated through the pod. For a moment, nothing happened. The sunlight gleamed off the warped metal, and the pod looked more corpse than craft. Then a faint, uneven flicker of light blinked on the interior console. A weak, sputtering glow, but a glow nonetheless. Reinka barked a derisive laugh. "See? I told you. Sparks. Fire hazard. Nothing more." He motioned to the other Crithians, who snickered and clicked in unison. Elliot felt the sting of the laughter but let it roll off him. Their judgment was predictable, a constant hum in the background of his days on Zorath 9. He bent closer to the pod, his gloved hands tracing the edges of the rusted panels. "Maybe sparks," he muttered, "but every engine needs a spark to start." His fingers worked with careful precision, pressing hidden buttons, reconnecting wires that had been chewed through by corrosion. The pod's interior lights flickered again, stronger this time, and Elliot's lips twitched in a small, satisfied smile. Mara leaned closer, whispering, "Don't let them get to you. You can do this." The human engineer's gaze swept over the scrapyard, over the alien faces twisted in disbelief, and for a fleeting moment, he imagined the pod rising above the dust clouds, engines humming with life, autonomous and unstoppable. He imagined it diving into the stormy tunnels of the mines, weaving between unstable beams, saving lives no one thought could be saved. But for now, the pod sat rusted and sputtering, mocked by the entire Crithian crew, a relic in their eyes. Elliot didn't flinch. He reached for a toolkit, pulling wires and modules from his pack, already planning his next moves. Every laugh, every jab, every snide remark was just fuel. He tapped another series of commands, and the pod responded with a whirring click, a subtle vibration running through its hull. It was a small victory, barely perceptible, but enough to ignite the fire inside him. This was the beginning. This was where potential met patience, ingenuity, and stubbornness. Reinka shook his head, muttering something about human folly, but Elliot didn't listen. Mara's encouraging presence was enough to ground him. The suns dipped lower, painting the scrapyard in molten orange and violet, shadows stretching across twisted metal. Somewhere beneath the jagged surface of Zoreth 9, tunnels waited, and Elliot's mind already raced ahead, plotting, imagining, calculating. The pod might have been a rusted heap to everyone else, but to Elliot, it was a canvas. And every canvas deserved a masterpiece, no matter how cracked or corroded it appeared. He smiled, wiping a smear of rust from his glove. "Let them mock," he said under his breath. "They'll see soon enough." The scrapyard's murmurs continued, the Crithians' laughter echoing, but Elliot tuned it out. He was already listening to the hum of potential beneath his hands. The pod, forgotten and abandoned, was about to become something no one expected. The next morning, Elliot returned to the scrapyard before the suns had fully risen, the chill of Zoreth 9's thin atmosphere cutting through his worn jacket. The escape pod sat in the same heap of rust and twisted metal, but now his presence lent it purpose. He knelt beside it, unpacking a small array of tools, circuits, and wiring modules from his bag. Each piece had a specific function, every component a step toward transforming the neglected shell into something more than junk. From the shadows, Reinka and a few of the Crithian miners watched, clicking and chittering with thinly veiled amusement. "Back again, human?" Reinka's voice echoed with mockery. "I thought you'd learned that rust doesn't forgive stupidity." Elliot glanced up without breaking his work. "Maybe it forgives the stubborn," he said quietly, connecting a fragile strand of wiring to a corroded interface. Sparks danced across the surface, harmless but bright enough to make Reinka jump back. "See? Fire hazard," Reinka hissed, waving his arms. "One wrong move, and you'll vaporize yourself." The other Crithians clicked in unison, laughter rippling through the scrapyard like a low tide of ridicule. Mara appeared beside Elliot again, her expression calm but determined. "Let him work," she said. "You don't understand human engineering. It's not just wires and circuits, it's instinct, calculation, and creativity combined." Zal leaned over from a distance, studying Elliot with his multiple eyes narrowed. "Creativity," he repeated, almost to himself, his mandibles clacking thoughtfully. "I've never seen it applied so recklessly. Fascinating." He didn't move closer, yet his curiosity radiated from him in waves, an invisible acknowledgement that Elliot's methods were unconventional. Ignoring the chorus of mockery, Elliot focused on the pod. He carefully removed a corroded panel, revealing a tangle of broken circuits beneath. He pulled a module from his bag, a salvaged navigation chip from a derelict drone, and began carefully integrating it into the pod's interface. His hands worked steadily, methodically, a rhythm he had perfected over years of scavenging and rebuilding. "Doesn't it bother you," Reinka sneered, "that every second you waste on that heap is another second you might be dead? That pod isn't designed for life, it's scrap." Elliot paused, hand hovering over the module. He finally looked up, meeting Reinka's gaze with calm certainty. "It isn't scrap until I say it is," he said. "Until then, it's potential. And potential can save lives, if you're willing to see it." Mara offered him a nod of encouragement. "Exactly. And they'll see soon enough," she said, her voice low. Reinka growled under his breath, clicking his mandibles in frustration. He stepped closer, peering over Elliot's shoulder at the work in progress. "I've seen many humans try," he said. "All of them ended in flames, or worse. That pod isn't special. You aren't special. Elliot smiled faintly, returning his attention to the pod. Special isn't the goal. Function is. He connected a final wire, and a low hum began to resonate from the pod. It was weak, irregular, but undeniably alive. The internal lights flickered, cycling through a spectrum of dim blues and greens. The Crithians froze, a flicker of uncertainty passing across their faces. Even Reinka tilted his head slightly, suspicion threading through his mockery. Elliot's hands moved quickly now, testing the pod's limited sensors and activating its rudimentary propulsion gyros. The hum deepened, a vibration under his fingertips, steadying into a rhythm that suggested it could operate, if only barely. Zal's eyes gleamed. "It responds," he whispered, almost reverently. "Unexpected. Unpredictable. Human design," he trailed off, lost in thought. Reinka snarled, snapping his mandibles. "Responds? It sputters. It will explode, human. You're courting disaster." He stepped back, his arms tense and ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Elliot leaned back, wiping sweat and grime from his brow, and tested the pod's minor systems again. He tapped a sequence into the handheld controller he had improvised, and the pod's tiny stabilizers clicked into motion. It wobbled, shifted, then settled, a small victory, but proof that his work was not futile. Mara's smile widened. "See? It's already working. Just barely, but it's alive." The Crithians whispered among themselves, a mix of doubt and awe threading through their clicks and murmurs. Reinka's eyes narrowed, suspicion and irritation warring within him. He had seen human tinkering before, but never with such audacity. The sparks and flickers of light were more than warning signs, they were evidence that Elliot's recklessness was doing something no one had expected. Elliot set the tools aside, kneeling in front of the pod and surveying his progress. Each panel secured, each wire connected, brought him closer to what he had imagined, an autonomous craft capable of maneuvering where conventional rescue machines could not. He ran a quick diagnostic, and the pod's systems hummed steadily. Not perfect, not finished, but alive. Reinka clicked his mandibles, stepping back with a growl of disbelief. "You've got sparks, but that's all. Sparks don't save lives." Elliot glanced up, a quiet determination in his eyes. "Maybe not yet," he said. "But give me time. Sparks can start fires, and fires can change everything." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And they will," she said softly. "You'll show them." The suns climbed higher, painting the scrapyard in harsh gold and red. The wind carried the faint metallic scent of rust and scorched circuits. Elliot bent closer, fingers tracing the edges of the pod, already plotting the next stage of modifications. The Crithians continued to whisper, click, and sneer, but their amusement was tinged with something Elliot couldn't yet name: curiosity. The pod's faint glow pulsed under his hands, a heartbeat of potential, waiting. And Elliot, human, stubborn, underestimated, was ready to breathe life into it. No one would take it seriously yet. No one, that is, except Mara, and Elliot didn't need anyone else. Elliot crouched in the scrapyard as the twin sons of Zoreth 9 beat down relentlessly, their light bouncing off the rusted metal around him. The escape pod, now partially stripped of its corroded panels, rested on improvised supports. He ran his gloved hands over the exposed framework, checking each joint, each fragile wire. The pod had survived another night, a testament to patience and meticulous care, and now it was time to push further. Mara stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression calm but vigilant. "Be careful," she warned. "One wrong connection and—" "I know," Elliot interrupted, his eyes fixed on the wiring matrix before him. "But we're past being careful. We're in the stage of making it work." Reinka clicked a warning from a distance, pacing in small, irregular steps. "Work," he repeated, each word dripping with mockery. "Human, that heap is more likely to fall apart than fly. You're gambling with sparks and rust. It's insane." Elliot ignored him. He had learned long ago that words from Crithians were background noise, and he had bigger calculations in mind. The pod's core systems were crude, designed decades ago for emergency use only. He had removed redundant circuits and scavenged modules from other broken drones, connecting sensors and thrusters in configurations that no one would have dared. The hum of the pod's tentative life pulsed faintly, a fragile heartbeat in the wreck. Mara knelt beside him, lifting a sensor module. This one's still good. It could stabilize the gyros if you integrate it here. Elliot took the module, examining the tiny circuit paths. It'll work better if I connect it through the feedback loop I've already laid out. Adds responsiveness, but keeps the risk manageable. He slid the module into place and soldered connections with precise, deliberate strokes. Sparks flickered from the tool, tiny arcs that danced across his gloves. Reinka's chittering grew louder. Feedback loops? You're talking about dangerous human improvisation. That thing will self-destruct before it moves 2 meters. Zal, silent until now, stepped closer, tilting his head in interest. His forearms flexed, each tipped with sensitive appendages. Intriguing, he said. The logic is unconventional. Unstable, yet elegant in a way I cannot deny. You're not following rules, human. You're inventing them. Elliot didn't pause. Rules are for the predictable, he muttered, tightening a connection. We're not being predictable. The Crithians exchanged uncertain clicks and murmurs. Even Reinka's snide expressions faltered as he watched the pod's lights blink in irregular patterns, synchronizing gradually with Elliot's adjustments. Something was changing, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it was working. Elliot stood and removed a panel from the pod's underside, revealing the propulsion array. He had scavenged microthrusters from other drones, tiny engines barely able to lift the pod itself. With careful alignment, he integrated them into the pod's frame, connecting them to the stabilization circuits he had modified. Mara handed him a small power converter, which he inserted into the core. The hum intensified, the pod shivering slightly as the new energy flowed. Reinka clicked his mandibles, leaning closer than caution normally allowed. "Do you hear that?" he hissed. "The whining of a doomed machine. It's only a matter of time before it explodes." Elliot tapped a sequence into the handheld controller, and the pod quivered, then slowly lifted a few centimeters off its supports. The movement was jerky, uneven, but undeniable. Sparks flew from misaligned thrusters, and the hull shivered, but the pod was moving. Mara's eyes widened. "It's working," she whispered, barely containing excitement. Reinka barked a harsh sound, a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Lucky movement. Not control." Elliot adjusted the controller, watching the pod stabilize. Its thrusters hummed, the sensors began reading environmental data, and the mini gyros balanced it. It hovered a few centimeters above the dusty ground, wobbling but intact. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "This is just the beginning," Elliot muttered, scanning the pod's output. "Next step, autonomous movement. It needs to navigate without me controlling it, to react to unexpected hazards." Zal's multiple eyes glimmered, studying the pod. Autonomous navigation in a structure this unstable? Bold. Reckless. I admire it. Reinka growled under his breath, stepping back. Admire it? Foolishness, more like. That human's about to get himself fried in a metal coffin. Elliot ignored him again, opening a compartment and inserting a salvaged AI core from an old mining drone. The tiny processor blinked to life, interfacing with the pod's feedback loops. He initiated the first test program, basic obstacle recognition and stabilization. The pod tilted, adjusted, spun slightly, then returned to a level hover. Each correction was uneven, clumsy, but it was learning. Mara smiled, a quiet thrill in her expression. Look at it. It's responding. Elliot nodded, running a hand along the pod side. It's alive. Just barely, but alive. Reinka clicked, scuttling back a step. Alive? It's unstable. You're tempting fate, human. Elliot crouched again, adjusting sensors and recalibrating thrusters. Sometimes, he said quietly, fate needs a little help. The Crithians watched, half amused, half curious. Sparks continued to fly from the pod's hull, but Elliot's hands moved with precision, soldering, connecting, tweaking. Slowly, deliberately, the corroded heap began to transform into something functional. The suns climbed higher, reflecting off metal and dust. Elliot tested the pod's sensors again, feeding it obstacle patterns from the scrapyard debris. The pod tilted, spun, corrected, and moved forward a few meters, then back. It wasn't graceful, but it was responsive. Mara leaned closer. "You see that? It's thinking." Elliot's lips curled into a small, determined smile. "Thinking and learning. That's the first step." Reinka ground his mandibles in irritation. "Thinking? It's just reacting. That's not enough to survive in the tunnels." Elliot tapped another program into the controller. "Then it'll learn faster than you expect." The pod quivered again, hovering steadily now, its lights pulsing with life. Sparks of electricity arced harmlessly across minor gaps, and the hum of the thrusters harmonized with the soft whirring of the processor. It was still fragile, still imperfect, but Elliot felt the first surge of triumph. Mara's hand rested on his shoulder. "You're doing it," she said softly. "They'll have to watch and see what you can make." Elliot nodded. "They'll see. Soon enough." He glanced at Reinka, who scowled and clicked his mandibles in frustrated disbelief. No one else mattered. The pod was alive, learning, and waiting. And Elliot's work had only just begun. Elliot stood back from the pod, wiping sweat from his brow as the suns climbed higher over the jagged horizon of Zorath 9. The escape pod hovered steadily now, the irregular flickers of light in its control panel smoothed into a faint, pulsating glow. He had integrated the AI core, aligned the gyros, and synchronized the microthrusters. For the first time, the pod responded to his commands with something approaching grace. It wasn't perfect, not by any measure, but it moved, and that was progress. Mara crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the readouts on the handheld controller. "It's stable," she said. "For now. But the real test is autonomous navigation. Can it handle unexpected obstacles?" Elliot nodded. "It has to. Otherwise, it's just a hovering toy. And toys don't save lives." He programmed a sequence into the pod, feeding it a simulation of the scrapyard clutter, twisted metal beams, rusted containers, sharp-edged debris. The pod's lights blinked as it processed the new data, then tilted forward slightly, hovering toward the obstacle course. Reinka clicked his mandibles sharply, pacing in his usual mocking rhythm. "Human, are you insane?" he hissed. "You're asking it to navigate chaos. That pod will self-destruct before it even reaches the first pile." Elliot's fingers moved over the controls, not to pilot, but to observe. "It won't self-destruct. It's learning. Watch." The pod wobbled, tilting to avoid a pile of crushed ore containers, then corrected itself midair, narrowly missing a jagged beam. Sparks flew from a misaligned thruster, and the pod shuddered, teetering dangerously. Reinka barked a laugh that was more disbelief than amusement. "I told you. Sparks and wobbling. Dead in seconds." Mara held her breath, biting her lip. "It's fine," she whispered, though her knuckles whitened on the controller. "It's adjusting." Elliot's eyes were sharp, calculating. He watched the feedback loop indicators, noting where the pod's processing lagged. Tiny delays in the sensor readings caused overcorrections, micro-wobbles that could become catastrophic if they compounded. He jotted notes quickly on a datapad, already planning the adjustments. The pod tilted sharply, swinging toward a heap of metal debris. A spark jumped from the thruster to the hull, and a small panel popped open. Alarmed, Reinka clicked in agitation. "I knew it. Metal coffin." Elliot moved quickly, tapping commands into his controller. The pod quivered violently, correcting, then spiraled unexpectedly, slamming into a rusted beam. It bounced, ricocheted against another pile of scrap, and skidded along the dusty ground, metal scraping against metal. The thrusters screamed in protest, small arcs of flame leaping from misaligned vents. Mara gasped, instinctively reaching forward. "Elliot! Stop it!" He didn't. He was already analyzing the failure, noting each misstep. The pod wasn't destroyed, just battered and sputtering. Its lights flickered weakly, sensors misaligned, gyros struggling to stabilize. Elliot crouched beside it, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and determination. "See?" Reinka clicked triumphantly. "I told you. Waste of credits, human folly, destined for scrap." He stepped closer, clearly ready to declare the pod dead. Elliot ignored the mockery. He opened the panel the spark had popped, carefully reconnecting the circuits, smoothing wiring, replacing a damaged thruster with a spare he had salvaged. Sparks continued to flicker, but this time under his control, a measured reminder that the machine was alive and responding. Zal moved closer, silent, observing every move. "You are daring fate," he murmured, mandibles clicking softly. "Yet you maintain control. Unstable, unpredictable, but controlled. I did not expect this." Elliot straightened, taking a deep breath. "It's not just control," he said quietly. "It's adaptation. The pod learns from failure. That's how it survives, how it will save lives." Mara helped him stabilize the thrusters and reconnect the core processor. "It's going to be okay," she said. "Just give it a moment." Elliot tapped a few final commands. The pod's lights flickered, then steadied. It tilted gently, hovering this time without violent jerks or sparks. Slowly, cautiously, it began to navigate the obstacles again, correcting minor wobbles instantly. Where it had failed moments ago, it now adjusted seamlessly. Reinka's clicks were slower, less triumphant, edged with confusion. It moved," he admitted reluctantly, his antennae twitching. "But this is luck, human. Nothing more." Elliot smiled faintly, kneeling beside the pod. "It's not luck. It's learning. Every misstep teaches it something new. And it's just the beginning." Zal's multiple eyes studied the pod, lingering on the small arcs of controlled sparks and the synchronized whirring of the microthrusters. "Learning," he repeated, almost to himself. "Human ingenuity, remarkable. Chaotic, yet effective." Mara's hand rested on Elliot's shoulder again. "You did it. For now, it's alive. Functional. That's progress." Elliot nodded, surveying the pod, already thinking ahead. The first test failure had almost destroyed it, almost silenced its potential, but it hadn't. It had adapted. It had survived. That survival, he realized, was proof that even rusted, discarded metal could become something extraordinary with enough persistence, insight, and care. Reinka clicked his mandibles irritably, his usual sneer faltering. He didn't understand it, not yet. He couldn't. But Elliot did. And that understanding, that stubborn determination to coax life from what everyone else had discarded, was exactly what would make the difference when it mattered most. The suns of Zoreth 9 blazed overhead, dust dancing in the wind. Elliot crouched beside the battered pod, already planning the next modifications. Sparks flickered harmlessly around the hull, like tiny reminders that potential could survive even when mocked. And Elliot knew, with quiet certainty, that failure was not the end. It was only the beginning. The alarms blared through the tunnels of Zoreth 9 like a chorus of warning sirens, reverberating off the jagged rock walls. Elliot was halfway through tightening a sensor on the pod when the vibration reached him, rattling the scrapyard beneath his boots. Dust swirled around the corroded metal heaps as he looked up, heart pounding. Mara's eyes widened, and she grabbed his arm. "That's not a drill," she shouted. "Something's wrong in the mines." Reinka's mandibles clicked sharply, a sound of alarm and agitation. "Collapse," he hissed. "Tunnel 8. Reports say, many trapped." He scuttled toward the edge of the scrapyard, gesturing to the communication panels flickering with emergency alerts. If it's not controlled, everyone in that sector could die. Elliot's gaze snapped to the pod, now hovering steadily with its new autonomous systems. He had prepared it for tests, obstacles, and navigation drills, but this was no simulation. Lives were at stake, Crithian and human alike. He tapped a few commands into his controller, activating the pod's emergency protocols and stabilizing systems. "It's time," he muttered. Mara followed him, keeping pace. "Do you think it's ready?" Elliot didn't answer. His fingers danced over the control interface, monitoring the pod as it hummed, sensors flaring to life, thrusters adjusting for lift. The scrapyard dust shifted beneath the increasing wind from the rising suns, but the pod hovered cleanly, poised for action. Reinka barked a warning. "Human, it's just a rusted heap." "You can't." "It's not just a heap," Elliot interrupted sharply. "It's capable. It will reach them where no other machine can." With a soft whirring, the pod lifted higher, clearing the scrapyard debris. Its tiny thrusters responded instantly to the complex input Elliot had programmed. The onboard sensors mapped the tunnels, projecting the structure and hazards back to his controller. Elliot's pulse quickened as he fed it the coordinates from the emergency alerts. Tunnel 8. Lives trapped beneath collapsed rock. Mara glanced at the readings. The standard rescue machines can't get through. The debris is too unstable. You might be the only chance. The pod surged forward, following its autonomous guidance. Elliot watched the readouts, seeing the obstacle recognition software in action. The thrusters flared, adjusting midair as simulated debris, twisted metal and boulders flashed across its sensors. It corrected, wobbling once, then stabilized, responding instantly to each challenge. Reinka's voice carried from the edge of the scrapyard, a mixture of disbelief and anxiety. "It won't hold. It's too small. Too fragile." The pod descended toward the tunnel entrance. Dust and rock shifted with each movement, threatening to destabilize the structure. Elliot's hands flew over the controller, monitoring every microsecond of data. The pod's lights blinked steadily, thrusters firing in short bursts to maintain balance. Inside Tunnel 8, miners were trapped. Screams echoed faintly through comms and damaged sensors. Dust choked the air, and large slabs of rock pressed down on weakened beams. Conventional drones had attempted to navigate the passage, but each had been forced to retreat as the structure threatened collapse. Time was slipping away. Elliot leaned closer to the controller. "Go," he whispered. The pod's programming took over fully now, reacting faster than he could manually, anticipating hazards and rerouting itself around fallen beams and unstable walls. The Crithians watched, tense and silent. Even Reinka's derision had faltered under the weight of the crisis. Zala's multiple eyes were focused on Elliot and the pod, fascinated despite the danger. "Incredible," he muttered. "The human has created a living machine." The pod's sensors detected a narrow gap beneath a fallen rock slab, just wide enough for it to squeeze through. Elliot held his breath as the pod tilted, compressed, and slipped into the tunnel, scraping against the jagged edges of stone. Sparks flew from minor collisions, but its hull remained intact. Inside, the pod illuminated the debris with soft, adaptive lights, projecting a live map back to Elliot's controller. He watched the miners' positions, calculating rescue paths. The pod hovered over a cluster of trapped workers, dropping small stabilization anchors that braced loose rocks and provided temporary support. Mara's voice trembled. "It's actually doing it." Elliot's jaw tightened. "It has to. Lives depend on it." The pod's AI responded to falling debris, firing microthrusters to dodge sudden collapses. It extended a small robotic arm, lifting a miner free and guiding them toward safer ground. Elliot's pulse raced as each movement was executed flawlessly, despite the chaotic environment. Reinka clicked repeatedly, disbelief giving way to reluctant awe. "It's functioning. Against all odds, it's working." The pod continued to navigate, rescuing more trapped miners, its lights pulsing steadily. Elliot monitored the feed, adjusting minor variables to optimize stability. Each successful extraction strengthened the pod's confidence in its programming, every correction reinforcing its ability to act autonomously. Dust, sparks, and the roar of instability filled the tunnel, but the pod persisted. Its thrusters flared, sensors blinked, and the AI recalculated paths in real time, saving miners who had no other hope. Elliot exhaled slowly, hands still on the controller, watching as the pod guided the last cluster of trapped workers toward the surface. Mara's hand gripped his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly, awe in her voice. The pod emerged from the tunnel entrance, carrying survivors. Sparks flickered along its hull, but it hovered steadily, alive and functional. Reinka and the other Krithians stared in stunned silence. Zul's eyes gleamed with something resembling admiration. Elliot leaned back, exhaustion and exhilaration washing over him. The pod had proven itself, saving lives in a situation no one believed it could handle. Rusted, corroded, mocked, it had performed perfectly when it mattered most. And for Elliot, that was only the beginning. The emergency siren shrieked through the mining compound as Elliot and Mara watched the conventional rescue drones struggle at the tunnel entrance. Towering machines, designed for heavy lifting and rapid extraction, skidded against unstable rock, their sensors failing to compensate for shifting debris. Sparks flew from exposed circuits, and each attempt ended in retreat. The drones were designed for efficiency and brute strength, not adaptability, and the unstable tunnel punished their rigidity. Reinka paced beside the scene, clicking his mandibles sharply, the sound laced with frustration and alarm. "I told you," he barked at the humans and other Krithians gathered near the entrance. "Those machines are useless here. Too rigid. They cannot adapt to collapse, to chaos. This is why we never trust outsiders for serious work." Zul remained closer to Elliot, observing quietly, his multiple eyes narrowing as the drones hesitated, thrusters sputtered, and sensors failed to map even the simplest path through rubble-strewn tunnels. "Predictable machines," he muttered, mandibles clacking softly. "Precise. Efficient. Deadly, in a static environment. But in chaos, pathetic." Elliot's fingers hovered over the controller for the escape pod, his pulse quickening. The pod had performed small-scale autonomous maneuvers in the scrapyard, but nothing like this. Tunnel 8 was a labyrinth of crumbled beams, jagged rock, and collapsing passages. He had tested the pod in simulations and with obstacle courses, but real lives were now depending on it. Mara gripped his shoulder. "This is it, Elliot. You're the only option left." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone with tension. "If the pod fails, there's no one else who can reach them." Elliot exhaled slowly. "It won't fail," he said, more to convince himself than anyone else. "It's designed to adapt, to think in ways machines like these cannot. It can go where they cannot." The conventional drones attempted another approach, their sensors flickering as dust and falling debris overwhelmed their systems. One giant clawed arm reached for a fallen beam, misjudged its weight, and collapsed part of the wall. A shower of rock and dust erupted, forcing the machine to retract with sparks flying from damaged thrusters. Reinka hissed and barked, his exoskeleton bristling. "They're useless," he snapped. "Completely useless. I warned you. Nothing but scrap." Elliot tapped a sequence into the pod's controller, sending it forward. The thrusters flared softly as it lifted off, hovering a meter above the ground before adjusting its trajectory toward the tunnel entrance. Its lights cut through the swirling dust, sensors scanning and mapping obstacles instantly. The pod moved with a fluidity that the large, cumbersome machines could not match. Inside the tunnel, the miners' voices echoed faintly, tinged with panic. Dust choked the air, and rock slabs shifted unpredictably with every tremor. Conventional rescue drones could not enter safely, their rigidity and size creating more danger than relief. Every second counted, and the human-engineered escape pod became the only viable option. Reinka's clicks faltered as the pod advanced. "Small, too small, not enough power," he started, but the pod had already slipped past a collapsed beam, tilted under an uneven arch of rock, and corrected itself midair. Its thrusters flared in rapid, precise bursts as it navigated the narrow space. Mara's hand tightened over Elliot's. "It's working. Look at it, it's reacting. It's thinking." The pod extended a small robotic arm, carefully lifting miner debris aside to create passage for trapped miners. Each movement was calculated, each adjustment precise. Sparks danced along miner contact points with the jagged rock, but the hull remained intact. Elliot monitored the feed on his controller, watching the pod's internal mapping build a real-time three-dimensional reconstruction of the collapsed tunnel. Reinka's mandibles clicked faster, a mixture of disbelief and begrudging fascination. It adapts. Moves, reacts. Impossible. Zul's multiple eyes tracked every motion. It anticipates collapse, he murmured. Learns from it. The human has done something extraordinary, something we never believed machines could achieve. The conventional drones retreated again, forced to abandon the tunnel as instability increased. Their sensors failed, thrusters misfired, and the walls threatened to collapse further. Dust clouds rose in a thick haze, obscuring vision and sending smaller debris sliding down the rock faces. The miners had no choice but to wait for the pod. Elliot adjusted the pod's feedback loop in real time, observing its autonomous decisions. It tilted, spun, and hovered with precision, avoiding sudden collapses, guiding trapped miners to safer pockets within the tunnel. Every action reinforced the AI's learning algorithms, making it smarter, faster, more capable with each movement. Mara's voice trembled with excitement. This is incredible, it's doing exactly what we hoped. Elliot didn't respond verbally. His hands were glued to the controller, making minor adjustments while letting the pod exercise its autonomy. The hum of thrusters, the flicker of lights, and the subtle sparks along its hull were signs of life, proof that even discarded, corroded metal could achieve greatness when guided by ingenuity and careful adaptation. Reinka leaned closer, his disbelief giving way to awe. It's surpassing the machines. Your human invention, it's saving lives where all others failed. Elliot finally allowed himself a brief, grim smile. That's the point, he said quietly. It's supposed to. Zul's multiple eyes glimmered with admiration. Human ingenuity, coupled with adaptability, remarkable. Even the most rigid Krithian designs cannot compete with this. The conventional rescue machines had failed completely, retreating from the unstable tunnel. All hope for traditional methods had vanished. The pod, corroded, mocked, and underestimated, remained the sole chance of survival for the trapped miners. Elliot leaned closer to the controller, tapping a sequence to optimize pathfinding. It's learning fast, he muttered. Faster than I expected, faster than anyone expected. Mara squeezed his shoulder. Then it's ready for the real test. Time to see if it can save them all. The suns of Zoreth 9 blazed overhead as dust and sparks swirled around the hovering pod. Conventional machines had failed, the tunnel remained treacherous, and human ingenuity, stubborn and underestimated, had become the only hope. And Elliot knew it had to succeed. Elliot's hands hovered over the controller, the hum of the escape pod resonating beneath him like a heartbeat. Tunnel 8 yawned before them, a fractured maw of rock, dust, and dangling beams. Every sensor flickered with danger, unstable walls, shifting boulders, and the faint, terrified calms of miners trapped deeper within. Conventional machines had failed, retreating one by one, and the weight of expectation pressed down on Elliot like the rubble above the miners' heads. Mara leaned close, her voice low but firm. This is it, Elliot. No one else can do this. Are you ready? He exhaled, steadying himself. It's ready. We've tested everything it can handle. Now it's time to see if it can do what it was designed for. Reinka clicked his mandibles, pacing beside them in agitation. Human folly, he hissed. You're sending that heap of rust into certain destruction. It's going to be smashed, crushed, or burned alive. Elliot's eyes were fixed on the pod, already hovering above the scrapyard, its thrusters flaring softly as it adjusted to the uneven ground. It's not a heap. It's alive, he said quietly. And it's going to prove it. Zal approached, a silent observer, mandibles clicking softly in curiosity. I have never seen a human construct survive so many failures and continue functioning, he murmured. Perhaps I underestimated their ingenuity. Elliot initiated the autonomous rescue sequence. The pod's lights blinked rhythmically, thrusters adjusting as it floated toward the tunnel entrance. It detected the unstable walls immediately, feeding a live 3D map back to Elliot's controller. Every misalignment, every hazard was calculated and logged. The pod tilted, slid, and rose, slipping through the narrow gap without a scrape. Inside the tunnel, the trapped miners were pressed against walls, fear etched into their faces, dust coating their suits. The sound of falling debris echoed ominously through the confined space. The pod's soft illumination cut through the haze, highlighting safe pockets of space amid the chaos. Elliot's pulse raced. Focus on the readings. Follow its lead, he whispered to Mara, though he knew they weren't guiding it. The pod's AI was in full control now, reacting faster than any human could, learning from each microadjustment, and calculating every risk in real time. The first miner was spotted beneath a precarious slab. The pod extended its robotic arm, delicate yet strong, wedging a stabilization anchor into the rubble. Dust cascaded as it lifted the weight slightly, enough to free the trapped miner. With precise movements, the pod guided the worker toward a safer area deeper within the tunnel, away from further collapse. Mara exhaled, barely containing her excitement. It's doing it. It's actually doing it. Reinka's clicks were sharp, incredulous. Impossible, he hissed. It cannot survive the hazards inside. Yet it moves, it adapts. The pod didn't hesitate. It moved deeper, its sensors mapping every fracture and unstable beam. Small arcs of controlled sparks flickered along its hull where minor collisions occurred, but each time it recovered instantly. The thrusters adjusted mid-air, the AI recalculating paths before any hazard could impact its course. Elliot leaned closer to the controller, monitoring the feedback. Every movement, every correction, it's learning faster than we predicted, he murmured. Every risk it avoids is another life saved. The miners' voices grew louder as the pod navigated closer, projecting its light and stabilization pulses to create safe zones. One by one, it extended robotic appendages, lifting debris, guiding them toward safer pockets, and occasionally carrying the smallest or most injured among them. Reinka's mandibles clicked erratically, frustration mingling with reluctant admiration. It surpasses the machines, surpasses everything we built for this task. Human invention. Zala's multiple eyes gleamed, focused on the pod's fluid maneuvers. It is not the metal or circuits, he whispered. It is the human design, the understanding of chaos, the anticipation, the adaptation. Extraordinary. The pod descended to the deepest trapped miners, sensors flaring as it detected falling boulders and unstable beams. A sudden collapse shifted a large rock, sending dust and debris cascading. The pod's thrusters flared instinctively, spinning to avoid impact, while the robotic arm extended to shield a miner, moving with near-human intuition. Elliot's heart thumped as he watched the AI anticipate danger before it even materialized. Mara whispered, her voice tense, it's saving them, one at a time. Every single one. The pod's lights cut through the dust-filled tunnel, mapping every inch, sending coordinates to Elliot's display. It hovered, balanced perfectly on micro-adjustments, and guided the last cluster of miners toward the safer section near the surface. Sparks flickered gently from minor contact points, but the hull remained intact, unyielding in its precision. Elliot's hands trembled slightly as he observed. It's doing exactly what I imagined, he said softly. No, better than I imagined. It's alive, thinking, saving lives. The pod guided the final miner out, thrusters flaring to hover near the tunnel exit as the group emerged into relative safety. Dust and debris swirled in chaotic patterns behind it, but the machine adjusted with flawless timing, shielding its passengers from falling rock and unstable walls. Reinka clicked his mandibles, his disbelief giving way to stunned silence. It worked, he muttered, almost incomprehensibly. That human, and that heap, they saved them all? Zala's multiple eyes glimmered with something between awe and admiration. Human ingenuity, he murmured. Corrosion and rust turned into salvation. I underestimated them. I was wrong. Elliot exhaled, relief and exhilaration flooding him. The pod had performed perfectly under conditions no one believed it could survive. Rusted, mocked, underestimated, it had become something extraordinary. Lives had been saved, and the impossible had been achieved. Mara's hand rested firmly on his shoulder. You did it, Elliot, she said softly. You made it real. Elliot nodded, eyes fixed on the pod as it hovered steadily, lights pulsing softly. We did it, he said, voice quiet but resolute. And this is only the beginning. The miners spilled from Tunnel 8 into the open expanse of the scrapyard, coughing and shielding their faces from the dust that clung to the ruins of Zorath 9's unstable rock. Every movement sent clouds of red particles swirling, but the pod hovered steadily above them, thrusters humming with precision, lights pulsing softly, as if breathing a quiet rhythm of life. Elliot and Mara watched, hearts pounding, as the last of the trapped workers emerged, guided by the pod's robotic arms and stabilization anchors. Reinka stood at the edge of the scene, mandibles twitching, his usual arrogance replaced by stunned silence. I don't understand, he muttered, barely audible. That heap of metal, it saved them. All of them. Against every expectation. Zala's multiple eyes scanned the pod's hull and the surviving miners. It is remarkable, he said softly, mandibles clicking in slow, deliberate acknowledgement. The human has constructed something beyond mere machines. It adapts. It anticipates. It acts where we cannot. Elliot exhaled, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. The pod's lights dimmed slightly as it settled into a hovering standby mode, sensors still scanning the terrain to ensure no remaining hazards lingered. The miners, now gathered in clusters, exchanged wide-eyed glances and cautious nods toward the hovering machine. Some whispered in hushed tones, half in awe, half in disbelief. Mara's hand rested firmly on Elliot's shoulder. You did it, she said, voice low but steady. You proved them wrong. And more importantly, you saved lives. The pod's AI projected the tunnel mapping onto Elliot's handheld controller, revealing every fracture, every collapsed beam, every hazard it had encountered. The paths it had carved, the corrections it had made, and the miners it had guided were all displayed in glowing lines. Elliot's pulse quickened with pride. This was not just survival, it was a demonstration of precision, learning, and ingenuity. Reinka's mandibles clicked slowly, almost involuntarily. I mocked you, he said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. I called that rusted heap a waste. I see now. I was wrong. He stepped closer to the pod, scanning its sensors and thrusters with cautious fascination. You, human, have made something I cannot explain with our traditional knowledge. Elliot nodded slightly, voice calm. It's not magic, Reinka. Just observation, adaptation, and persistence. Things everyone overlooked. The miners, now gathering themselves, began to murmur among each other. Some glanced at the pod and then at Elliot, expressions softening from relief to respect. One older Crithian, whose limbs were scarred from years of mining, clicked a low, reverent note. This is incredible. Rusted? Mocked? No longer. This human, he has built what we could not. Mara's eyes glinted with quiet satisfaction. You see that? They're beginning to understand. Elliot's gaze shifted to the pod, still hovering, its lights reflecting off dust particles like tiny stars. They'll understand more soon, he said. They'll see it wasn't just luck. It was learning, adaptation, intelligence. Zal approached, his forearms flexing as he examined the pod's stabilizers and thrusters. The human's design principles, he murmured, are unconventional, chaotic, yet effective. I must study this. There is knowledge here beyond standard Crithian engineering. Reinka's gaze remained on Elliot, a mixture of grudging respect and disbelief. I do not like it, he admitted finally, but you have proven one thing, a heap of rust can be more than scrap if the mind behind it knows what to do. Elliot smiled faintly, tired but resolute. Exactly. Potential isn't determined by appearance, Reinka. It's determined by what you make of it. The miners began to organize themselves, shaken but alive. The pod hovered nearby, thrusters pulsing as it monitored the area, a silent guardian now recognized as savior. Elliot and Mara walked among the survivors, checking for injuries, offering reassurance, and seeing the first signs of genuine gratitude in eyes that had moments ago been filled with terror. A younger Crithian miner approached, hesitating, then clicked softly. You saved us. All of us. I will not forget this. Elliot nodded to him. Neither will I. That's why I built it, to save lives that others thought were lost. Rhineca's clicks grew slower, less sharp, as if each one carried a grudging acknowledgement of Elliot's ingenuity. Zala's eyes lingered on the pod, studying its adaptive movements, already calculating ways to incorporate its principles into Crithian technology. Even the skeptics among the miners had softened, realizing that their laughter, their mockery, had been premature and short-sighted. Elliot stood back, letting the miners and the pod have the spotlight. He knew that the world would remember this day not for the collapse, not for the dust and chaos, but for what a single human could achieve when no one else believed in the possibility. The pod, rusted and mocked only days ago, had rewritten expectations, demonstrated ingenuity, and saved lives where machines designed for power had failed. Mara leaned close, whispering with pride, "You changed everything today." Elliot's gaze returned to the hovering pod, now calm, lights pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "No," he said quietly, voice steady with certainty. "It changed everything. And we're only getting started." The scrapyard was quiet now, a stark contrast to the chaos of Tunnel 8 moments ago. Dust still hung in the air, illuminated by the fading light of Zorath 9's twin suns. Elliot stood beside the hovering pod, surveying the scene. The miners had been checked, stabilized, and moved to safer areas. The pod's thrusters pulsed gently, the soft hum a steady reminder of its capabilities. Rhineca stepped forward, mandibles clicking in a slower, more deliberate rhythm. There was no mockery now, only the hesitant acknowledgement of Elliot's achievement. "Human," he said, his voice low, carrying an edge of grudging respect, "I do not understand how you made that heap of rust function so perfectly. You have skill. Ingenuity. Perhaps more than I anticipated." Elliot inclined his head slightly, wary of Rhineca's mixed tone. "It wasn't just me. Observation, adaptation, and persistence," he said calmly. "The pod learned from its environment, from mistakes, from every movement. That's what made it effective." Mara's expression softened as she watched the Crithians' reactions. "They're realizing something important," she said quietly. "That intelligence isn't always obvious at first glance. That innovation often comes from unexpected places." Zala's multiple eyes scanned the pod from various angles, flickering in fascination. "You have created a new paradigm," he said softly. "Machines of metal and circuits that adapt, survive, and act where conventional design fails. I will study this. There is knowledge here that Crithian engineers have overlooked for centuries." Rhineca's mandibles clicked sharply again, this time in conflicted thought. I may have mocked you, human. I may have thought your purchase foolish. But now, respect is due." He stepped closer, scanning the pod's stabilized thrusters. "You have proven that even what is corroded, rejected, and undervalued can surpass the expectations of all of us if guided by clever design." The miners gathered nearby, a mix of humans and Crithians, whispered among themselves. Some exchanged glances with Elliot, hesitant admiration in their expressions. One older Crithian miner clicked softly, antennae twitching in what Elliot recognized as a gesture of reverence. "We laughed at you," the miner admitted, "but now, we see. That rusted pod saved us when nothing else could. That is honor." Elliot's eyes softened, a faint smile forming. "Potential is never obvious at first. It takes patience, observation, and the willingness to see what others cannot. That's what I built the pod to do, to find the way when others fail." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now, they see it. They understand." Rhineca's clicks grew thoughtful, almost hesitant. "Perhaps," he said finally, "humans are unpredictable. Clever. Resourceful. I will admit it. Today, your work, your heap of rust, demonstrated something beyond Crithian expectation." Elliot glanced at the pod, its lights pulsing gently. "It's more than just a machine," he said quietly. "It's a proof of concept. That the underestimated can achieve the extraordinary." A younger Crithian miner approached, eyes wide with curiosity. "Can it do this again?" the miner asked, voice trembling with excitement. "If we need it, can it save more?" Elliot nodded. "Yes. That's the idea. Every challenge makes it stronger, faster, more capable. It learns. It adapts. That's the advantage over rigid, traditional designs. Zala's multiple eyes glimmered. It is not just survival. It is evolution in action. You have shown that a single human mind, guided by observation and ingenuity, can outperform systems designed by thousands of our engineers. Reinka's antennae twitched, conflicted yet thoughtful. I do not like admitting it, he murmured, but there is a lesson here. We cannot rely solely on convention. Innovation comes from risk, from adaptation. Even rusted scrap can become extraordinary. The miners began to gather around the pod, examining it with awe. Some touched its hull cautiously, testing its stability, while others whispered to one another about the ingenuity behind its design. A sense of reverence replaced the earlier mockery, and Elliot could see the beginnings of trust forming between species in machine. Mara leaned close to Elliot. You've not just saved lives today, she said softly. You've changed minds. You've rewritten expectations. They'll remember this moment for generations. Elliot looked at the hovering pod, its thrusters still pulsing softly, lights blinking in a calm rhythm. It's not about recognition, he said. It's about capability. About making something that can perform when it matters most. Respect is just a consequence of results. Reinka's mandibles clicked once more, a low, slow acknowledgement. Results speak louder than words. Today, you have spoken loud enough for all of us to hear. Zala's gaze remained fixed on the pod, fascinated by the interplay of adaptation and intelligence. Human, you have created a model that will influence Crithian engineering. I underestimated your species. This is remarkable. The miners, once skeptical and mocking, now offered nods of respect and quiet gestures of gratitude. Elliot's pod hovered gently among them, lights pulsing like a heartbeat, an embodiment of persistence, ingenuity, and unassuming power. Elliot exhaled, glancing at Mara. They see it now. They know what's possible when you refuse to discard potential. Mara nodded, eyes shining. And they'll remember. The heap of rust that saved lives, and changed minds. Reinka's clicks faded to silence, replaced by a reluctant admiration that lingered as the suns of Zorath 9 dipped lower, casting long shadows across the scrapyard. Elliot's creation had not only survived but had redefined expectations, and the world around it would never see him the same way again. The suns of Zorath 9 hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the scrapyard now filled with miners, machines, and curious onlookers. The dust of Tunnel 8 had settled, leaving behind a scene of quiet triumph. Elliot stood beside his pod, hands resting on the control interface, watching the thrusters pulse softly as it hovered with precision, lights blinking in calm, deliberate rhythm. The pod had become more than a machine, it was a symbol, proof that ingenuity and persistence could defy expectation. Reinka approached cautiously, antennae twitching, mandibles clicking in a sound that now carried something closer to respect than derision. Human, he said slowly, voice measured, your rusted pod, it has done what none of our designs could. You have rewritten what we thought possible. Elliot nodded, a small, satisfied smile forming. It's not about rewriting rules, he said. It's about seeing what's possible when you refuse to discard potential. The pod wasn't special because it was new or powerful, it was special because I refused to let it be just scrap. Mara stood beside him, her expression softening as she observed the crowd of miners, humans and Crithians alike, now clustered around the hovering pod. Their skepticism had melted into admiration, whispers of respect and awe circulating among them. They understand now, she said quietly. They see what you've done. Zala's multiple eyes scanned the pod with keen fascination, arms folded as he considered every detail. You have not only built a machine, he murmured, but a paradigm. One that can adapt, survive, and act in ways even Crithian engineers cannot conceive. I underestimated your species. I am impressed. Reinka's mandibles clicked again, hesitant but honest. I mocked you, he admitted, antennae flicking in embarrassment. I called your purchase foolish. I did not believe a human could achieve such precision, such adaptability. I was wrong. You have my respect. Elliot allowed a small laugh, shaking his head. It wasn't about respect at first. It was about life saving lives. Recognition is just a consequence. The miners gathered around, some placing tentative hands on the pod's hull, testing its stability, while others whispered among themselves. It saved us, one murmured. Where others failed, this human-made pod saved us all. Another added, it isn't just the machine, it's the mind behind it. Ingenuity, persistence, courage. Mara's eyes glimmered. This is bigger than any of us imagined. They'll talk about this for generations. Not just the rescue, but the lesson behind it. Potential isn't obvious at first glance. The pod descended slowly, landing on reinforced supports Elliot had prepared, thrusters flaring briefly before settling. Its lights dimmed to a gentle pulse, sensors remaining active but calm. The miners stepped back, giving it space, as if honoring what it had accomplished. Elliot reached out, brushing a hand along its hull. It was corroded, scratched, and scarred from the chaos it had navigated, but those scars told the story of triumph, not weakness. Reinka studied it closely, his tone more reflective than ever. Your creation will change Crithian engineering, he admitted. We rely too heavily on rigid designs, on brute strength. You have shown that adaptation, intelligence, and unconventional thinking can achieve what strength alone cannot. Zal's eyes glimmered in agreement. Protocols, standards, they will evolve because of this. I will study every aspect of your design. This, human invention, it is remarkable. Elliot glanced at Mara, her expression echoing his own quiet pride. We didn't just save lives today, he said softly. We changed expectations. We proved that what's discarded, mocked, or overlooked can become extraordinary with the right approach. The miners, now moving back toward their camps, whispered among themselves, nodding in acknowledgement in newfound respect for the human and the pod. The rescue had not only saved them, it had rewritten their understanding of possibility, innovation, and courage. Reinka finally straightened, antennae flicking in thoughtful contemplation. I do not say this lightly, he said, voice steady. You have earned a place among us, human. Not for your strength, not for your wealth, but for your vision, your persistence, and the life you saved with a heap of rust. Elliot nodded, the weight of the day settling into quiet satisfaction. That's all that matters, he said. Lives saved, and the opportunity to do more. The pod isn't the end, it's the beginning. Zal inclined his head, mandibles clicking softly in approval. Yes. The beginning of a new approach to engineering, to problem solving, to life-saving innovation. This day will be remembered. Mara squeezed Elliot's shoulder gently. You did it. Not just for the miners, but for everyone who will see what's possible now. The heap of rust that became a hero. The pod hovered quietly, lights pulsing like a heartbeat, thrusters humming softly, a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and perseverance. Elliot looked out over the scrapyard, now quiet, dust settling, the twin suns painting the horizon in gold and crimson. The laughter, the mockery, the disbelief of the past days had vanished, replaced by respect, admiration, and awe. Elliot's invention had not only saved lives, it had reshaped perception, rewritten the rules of possibility, and earned a place in history. He allowed himself a slow, satisfied breath, eyes on the pod that had defied expectation. We changed everything, he said quietly. And we're only getting started. The miners, the Crithians, the machines all bore witness to it. Rusted, mocked, discarded, and now celebrated. The pod's lights pulsed steadily, a quiet rhythm of triumph, adaptation, and hope, as Elliot and Mara stood side by side, knowing this was the dawn of a new era.